It was intentional when I designed this course that the design section didn't get taught until well into the content. When most people think about design, or let me back up. When most people think about branding, they immediately think of design, but there's actually so much more that goes into it. And I'm glad that we got to travel on that journey of insight and inspiration together before we reach this point, because it was important to do that first. Now we're ready to look at some inspiration for how our brand looks. Here are some design themes that I see often in Sage archetype brands. Obviously, you're not going to use all of them in one design, but you might take a spark of inspiration here to like maybe research further and see how you can incorporate it into your brand design. So I often see a focus on text instead of images. Very, very common in Sage archetype brands. Things like books, attics, scrolls, owls, brains, glasses, suspenders are all visual cues that remind us of smart people and of the process of learning. Having a very minimalist design, so again, focus on the content, focused on the information, then on the then like images or design, has an emotional impact and sends a message in of itself. Science themes, so like beakers, periodic table of elements, lots of places where you can extend those ideas. Classic or slightly old-fashioned serif fonts tend to work really well. Having a monochromatic design, you notice that I'm using lots of grays and almost gray, blues, and blacks in this particular presentation design. That was on purpose. You could also adopt like rich, serious colors like gray, navy, forest, and burgundy to communicate the depth of your knowledge, right? So by choosing deeply saturated colors, it gives us a unconscious reaction that there's depth and there's like a sense of preeminence or permanence with your brand. Things like equations and diagrams and infographics are also common themes as well. Now, these are not my own designs, brand designs, so I'm using them as teaching elements to illustrate what I mean here. So here in this brand, you see the imagery of a brain, and then you also see the diagram of like a Wi-Fi signal as well in the top option there. And one of the messages is stay plugged in. So very, very sagey. This is fun too. Let me just scroll this up here. They have a typo. Not sage-like. Make sure you watch the typos because accuracy is really important for Sage brands. It's something that I struggle with personally. So do you know coffee? Well, forget it. Coffee, but not as you know it. Again, so focusing on like that discovery and knowing process, knowing the truth about something, all very much in alignment with the Sage archetype. This one is a more prestigious Sage archetype, but notice like the infographic there on the content. Very clean, very minimalist, straight edges, not a lot of color, very orderly. All of these things speak to that Sage messaging. Same here, like very, very clean. Not a lot of emphasis on intricate design elements, which is design in of itself. It's hard to show this type of restraint in minimalist design, but it does send a very clear message that you're focused on the fundamentals. You only, like you're thoughtful in what matters, in what you're going to present is visual information for your ideal clients and customers. It speaks to that brand experience that you have. This one's a little bit busier and a little bit more like a mix with magician, perhaps, with some of that symbolism of the pyramids. But I loved the brand name and I loved this pattern that comes together because it's a little bit more of a playful sage, Curious and Company. This one has those deep colors that we spoke about. So these are Risk Brokers. I love the deep emerald green. And then they have some great icons there. And then check out even like the mock-up with their letterhead and their business card. They laid it on top of the New York Times. How perfect is that brand association? Okay, so here are some examples for color schemes. You may or may not see one that you love here, and that's totally normal and fine. The important thing is that you're noticing the patterns and you're taking inspiration from the ideas behind the color schemes. So you notice that a lot of the colors are either very muted and reserved or very deep, saturated colors that communicates like a seriousness, the fact that you're not like all wild and crazy. You also see a lot of colors that you might see like in a library or in a bookstore, those types of things, or like a college. Collegiate colors are very popular for sage brands as well, which I can see in that the top middle one there with the blues and the yellows. That mustard yellow reminds me of college for some reason. So you can use these as you're looking for colors of your own brand. As inspiration as starting points. Similar to the fonts, notice that none of them are very weird or very attention grabbing. We want to keep the information on the content, not on the design of the letters, because that's where people are getting the value from. You do see a little bit of like some of the mono fonts. I use the CP Mono in this presentation design, kind of alludes to like coding or old computers. You see like old typewriter letters too as well, that you could use in small moderations to produce this kind of emotional impact that we're looking for. But otherwise, stick to very plain, clean fonts that are easy to read so you don't hinder the experience that people have with your information. There's a design checklist in the guidebook that you can, again, do an audit of all of your different design points of contact with your clients and take stock of how you're showing up in the world now through your design, and then also use it as a planning tool for how you're going to improve, or all of the pieces that you're going to improve and communicate your brand archetype through.